Manny Armada, representing
Here.
Jose Ramos is here. All right, Manny's the one that's here, right?
Yes.
Okay. Elia Nunez.
Good afternoon, here.
Daniel Iglesias, representing FDOT.
Afternoon here.
Lorraine Kelly Cargill, representing South Florida Regional Transportation Authority.
Here.
Scarlett Hammonds, representing Miami-Dade County School Board.
Here.
Javier Rodriguez, representing Expressway Authority.
I'm here. Good afternoon.
Afternoon. Jose Sanchez, representing the City of Hialeah.
Present. Good afternoon.
Afternoon. Jose R. Gonzalez, representing Miami Beach. Alan Dodd, representing the City of Miami.
Good afternoon, I'm here.
Bernard Buxton Tete, representing City of Miami Gardens. I think Bernard's muted. Lisa, are you able to unmute Bernard? Great, I see him there, Bernard. Welcome.
No sound on my end.
I hear you now. Julio Brea, representing the City of Homestead. Rita Carbonell, representing the City of Doral.
Good afternoon, I'm here.
And Jorge Gomez, representing the City of Coral Gables.
Good afternoon, present.
Are there any other council members present that I have not called? All right, Mr. Chairman, you have quorum.
All right.
Wilson, I believe you're muted.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Want to give special thanks. This is our fourth meeting in the virtual world that we're conducting. So I appreciate everybody's effort to bear with us and keeping the TPC going. As you know, we have a couple of ground rules, so this may sound familiar for some, but we need to go through it each time. So this is a public meeting and is being recorded. If you experience technical difficulties, please call Lisa Wang at 954-716-8823 or the email listed so that a member of our technical support team may assist you. Council members are encouraged to enable their video cameras. I want to see all those beards and everybody's hair and everything. Presenters are encouraged to enable their video cameras when presenting and to mute their microphones when not speaking. For council members only, to move a motion or an amendment, the council member shall unmute his or her microphone, clearly state his or her name for the record, and propose or second a motion. The TPO clerk will record the action and verbally confirm the council member's name. The TPC chairman will then call the vote, starting with dissenting votes. Council members in favor shall state their names and for the record and verbally express yea. The chairman will then call for dissenting votes. The council members in opposition shall state their names for the record and verbally express nay. All right. With that said, let's move into our agenda, beginning with the approval of the agenda. Do I have anybody to move it?
I move it. Danny Iglesias.
I'll second it, Javier Rodriguez.
All those approving, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Agenda is moved. Second item, approval of minutes. Would anybody want to move that?
Move.
Any comment?
Move
We
it. George Gomez.
Thank you. Any changes from anyone? Okay, so let's call it, all those in favor for approval of the minutes, say yay.
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 All right, any opposed? All right, we have approval of minutes. Okay, we do have quite an agenda, so let's get started with the action items.
Mr.
Item
Chairman,
three.
one moment, please, if I may interrupt.
Sure.
Approval of the minutes. I had a motion by Jorge Gomez, but I did not hear a second.
No, Rita,
Second.
I think Jorge seconded and Rita moved it, if I'm correct.
It's fine by me either way.
Okay, that's what I thought I heard.
All right, so I'll record it as Rita Carbonell motioned and Jorge Gomez seconded. Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome. All right, action items. We have several action items, so let's begin with action item 3A. Madam Clerk, can you read this into the record?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Action item 3A, resolution recommending approval of an amendment to the fiscal year 2021 Transportation Improvement Program to provide additional funding for a roadway improvements project along Northwest 97th Avenue from Northwest 154th Street to Northwest 170th Street, project number PW000961. This is a Miami-Dade Department of Transportation and Public Works item.
Thank you. Let me see if we can get a motion on this in a second, and then we can have some discussion on it.
Jose Sanchez motion.
Do I have a second?
I second, Elia.
Okay, all right. So with that said, for discussion, as our clerk mentioned, this is a DTPW item, but it does involve the city of Hialeah, which is here with us today. Do any members have any questions for DTPW? Okay, I think, is everybody ready to move the item?
I have a
And-
quick question, Wilson.
Sure.
Sorry. Is there a plan for a future extension further north to maybe 183rd Street, Miami Gardens Drive?
Hi, this is Elia. I think I have Miguel Soria on the call that he can probably assist in answering that question. I do not believe so at this time, but I think Miguel will probably be better to answer that. Okay, so not at this time. We do not have a plan to extend it to 183rd.
Understood. Thank you.
Mhm.
If I may, through the chair,
Okay, sure.
there's currently a 2-lane road that was constructed by a developer north of 170th. It doesn't go to 186, but it's somewhere around that range. It definitely goes past Northwest 170th Street. I just don't know how far the equivalent of the cross street, but it goes out maybe at least for another half mile north beyond that point. This phase right here is going to be 4-lane divided, and then it tapers down to meet those 2 lanes that are past 170.
Right. This is Miguel. Just to reiterate what Eddie was saying, no, at this time we don't. We stop at 170th Street. And there are some plans to improve 170th Street. But no, not beyond, not north of that.
Understood. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments? Okay. I'll call the question. So all those in favor, say yay.
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 Okay.
Any opposed? All right, item passes unanimously. Next item, 3B. Madam Clerk, can you read it into the record, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and before I do that, if I may, I see that Julio Brea has joined us, so I just wanted to recognize that he's also present.
Yes. Hi.
Agenda item 3.
Welcome.
Resolution recommending approval of an amendment to the fiscal year 2021 Transportation Improvement Program to add the project development and environment and design phases of State Road 826 Palmetto Expressway project from south of Northwest 36th Street to Northwest 154th Street, FM number 4471651. This is a Florida Department of Transportation project.
Thank you. And we have Mr. Daniel Iglesias with us. So can I get a motion to move and a second before we go into discussion?
Move. Rita Coronel.
Second.
Thank you. All right.
I need to clarify who the second was.
George Gomez.
Thank you.
All right. So, as mentioned, this is a DOT item, and we have Mr. Daniel Iglesias here. If you have any questions, or Danny, would you like to speak to this project a bit before taking a vote?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this is the phase 2 of a two-phased approach to improve the capacity in the general purpose lanes along State Road 826. Specifically within the limits of the Palmetto Express lanes segment that is currently in existence today. The limits of the project are from State Road 836 up to Northwest 154th Street. This phase will be a standalone project. It's going to add an additional general purpose lane in the southbound direction. And the main scope of the project is to relocate the existing 103rd Street flyover pier. That pier currently creates a constraint on the main line southbound Palmetto Expressway, where we cannot physically add another lane without moving that pier. So this project will, in essence, keep the flyover open, relocate that pier, and create the room for the additional lane. The project is going to require a state PD&E or a SEER. That's why we're asking for the PD&E phase to be included in the TIP amendment. And we also are planning to start the design phase of the project this current fiscal year, starting at the end of September, beginning stages of October. We expect to have construction start on this project in January of 2022. It should end construction in October of 2023. And we're planning to advertise an RFP for a design build project after the completion of the of our concept plans.
Okay, thank
Happy
you.
to field any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Iglesias?
Chair, I have a comment, not necessarily a question.
Sure.
Charlotte Hammonds. I would like to just note that there are school facilities in the vicinity of this project, and that FDOT is asked to coordinate with the school district prior to construction.
Yes, we will definitely do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions or comments? All right, let's call the question. We already have motion and a second, so all in favor say yay.
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 Any opposed? All right, item passes unanimously. Let's move on to item 3C. Madam Clerk, can you read it to the into the record?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Resolution recommending approval of an amendment to the fiscal year 2021 Transportation Improvement Program to include the Florida Department of Transportation District 6 roll forward projects that were originally scheduled in fiscal year 2020 TIP for authorization and were not obligated by June 30th, 2020. This is also a Florida Department of Transportation project.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Clerk. And I understand that it is a DOT project, but that it does involve many projects that DTPW is the lead implementation agency, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
Okay, all right. So as the others, can I get a motion and a second before discussion?
Move it.
Name?
Javier.
Javier.
Second, Julio.
All right. So anybody have any questions or comments, or maybe DOT or DTPW would like to discuss this project?
I can open up the discussion, Mr. Chair. These are, I believe the amendment included 4 projects. However, it's actually 3, and I think that needs to be corrected in the amendment because one of the 4 that was previously submitted was since executed, which is the FTA grant and the FDOT contribution of the South Corridor Smart Transit Project. Therefore, it's 3 projects that are rolling forward and therefore are needed to be amended in the TIP.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, as amended. As amended.
Yeah. Okay. So,
This is Elia. I don't have anything else to add. I don't know if anybody had any questions in regards to the projects that are listed.
yeah. Is there any other questions or comments on those items? And I just want to make sure that our clerk gets this right. So, Madam Clerk, can you read back as to the amendment to this item?
Yes, my understanding is the item was amended to eliminate item number 4 in the roll forward project list. And that's the FM number 444901-0, the South Corridor BRT FTA section 5039 project.
Correction to that, it should be 444901-1, not -0.
Okay.
All right, and just as a note, this item is going to the board on the 24th, and the item will be published including that item, unless we get a corrected letter from FDOT.
That's noted, and I will work with staff to see if we can amend the letter. This notification actually came from Miami-Dade County DTPW to us this morning via email, so I will need to discuss with staff and then correct that.
Yes, that is correct. It was approved just today.
Okay. Hot off the press, great. So can I call it the question to the item as amended? All in favor, say yay.
Aye.
Aye. Yay.
Yay.
Yes.
Yay. Any opposed? All right, item passes as amended. Thank you. All right. So item 3D.
Item 3D
Madam
is,
Clerk?
yes, Mr. Chairman. Resolution recommending approval of an amendment to the fiscal year 2021 Transportation Improvement Program to add new federal transit administration section 5307 program funding and the transfer of federal highway administration funds for use by Miami-Dade Department of Transportation and Public Works for the Strategic Miami Area Rapid Transit Smart Plan Priority Corridors Development Project, FM number 442497. This is a Miami-Dade Department of Transportation and Public Works item.
Thank you. Would anybody like to move and second the item before discussion?
Move it.
Seconded.
All right. This is a DTPW item, so I don't know if the department wants to give a little briefing on this or if we have any questions or comments from our members.
Hi, Wilson, it's Elia. I do have Robert Villar on the call, just in case there are any questions in regards to it, but it is transferring or requesting moving funds from FHWA to FTA, which frees up PPP funds, our local funds, for use of Smart Plan corridor projects. I don't know if Robert wants to add anything else to that.
There's no need, Elia covered it. Robert Villar, Transportation Public Works Department. So this, if you all recall, the TPO came up with a funding strategy for the Smart Plan that included freeing up local match. And so essentially what this does is it draws down federal funds. The Department of Transportation Public Works uses those for eligible FTA expenditures that would have otherwise been paid for by surtax, thereby freeing up surtax funds that can be used as match to the different Smart Plan corridors. More than happy to entertain any questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Robert. Any questions, comments? All right, let's call the question. All in favor of item 3D, please say yay.
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 Those opposed? All right, item passes unanimously. Next item, 3E. Madam Clerk.
Resolution recommending approval of the South Florida Regional Transportation Authority Transit Asset Management Plan performance targets for 2019 and 2020. This is a South Florida Regional Transportation Authority item.
All right. Can I get a motion and a second?
Motion to move, Rita?
I'll second it. Javier.
Okay. All right. And we do have SFRTA. This is SFRTA. And do we have somebody? Is it?
Hi, Wilson.
Lorraine, how you doing?
Good, good.
So perhaps you want to go over a little bit of this just for membership to further understand and field any questions that the members may have.
Okay, sure. So, Lorraine Cargill with the SFRTA. On an annual basis, we are required to submit our TAM performance targets to each MPO for incorporation into your TIP. And so this is our 2019 and 2020 TAM performance targets that we are submitting to you today. Our TAM targets looks at 4 major asset classes, as FTA calls them, our rolling stock, our infrastructure, our facilities, and our equipment. For our rolling stock, right now we are showing a 25%, about 25% of our rolling stock are getting to their 39-year useful life. And so that's what the chart is showing there. As such, we are, we are programming and planning to upgrade our rolling stock over the next 5 to 10 years. But right now, it's showing about 25% of our rolling stock reaching its useful life. Regarding infrastructure, these are slow orders along our rail corridor. As you can see, initially we had an 8% target there. We have actually improved on our corridor work over the last year. And so we are showing only about 3.5% of our rail corridor having slow orders. So that has improved tremendously. Regarding facilities, only about 5% of our facilities are, I would say, below that 2.5% scale that FTA gives us. And so pretty much 95% of our facilities are in pretty good shape. Pretty much, I think it's just one station that we know that we need to do some upgrades on, and that is being scheduled over the next year. And the last item there is just our equipment. This is our non-revenue service vehicles, and we're just showing just a small portion of our equipment reaching its useful life. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions you may have.
All right, hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, say yay.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yay.
Those opposed, nay. All right, item passes unanimously. All right, that concludes the action items. We do today have 2 informational items. Beginning with item 4A, the Southeast Florida 2045 Regional Transportation Plan. And I believe we have Mr. Tawari Edmondson that is going to provide us a brief presentation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Fernandez, for having me. I'm also want to thank the council for your time, for giving me the opportunity to present this presentation to you guys, to give you guys an update. But yeah, as Wilson said, I'm the TPO liaison to the SEFTEC, Southeast Florida Transportation Council, and I'm here today to just give you an update of the last document, the most recent document approved by that council, which is the 2045 Regional Transportation Plan. Next slide, please. So what is the SEFTEC? Just to give the council background on what the SEFTEC is the Southeast Florida Regional Transportation Council, which is really a formal partnership of the 3 MPOs, all within the U.S. Census designated Miami urbanized area. So from you can see on the map, it includes the Palm Beach, Broward County, and the Miami-Dade MPOs. And I always say when I'm giving this presentation, I know about myself, I don't know about a lot of you guys. I work, live, play in different counties. I don't personally see where the county line ends and where it begins. And this really just highlights the necessity for regional transportation coordination of our plans. If we're going to be planning for 20, 30 years in the future, it is important that all 3 regions are coordinated. And just to even give a little more background, so each of the MPO boards are made up of one respective member. Each of the board members of the SEFTEC is made up of one respective member of the MPO boards, and they meet from 2 to 4 times a year. Now, functions of the SEFTEC. The SEFTEC really serves as a forum for policy coordination, and it undertakes regional planning efforts. Now, these efforts include approval of the regional network map. What constitutes a region? What roadways constitute a region? We also prioritize the transportation projects in the Miami urbanized area for the Transportation Regional Incentive Programs, which is the TRIP programs. So we're the body that prioritizes the funds that go to regional TRIP programs. We also have a regional public involvement process. And of course, we have the regional long-range transportation plan, which is what I'm here to speak about today. Next slide, please. Now, so for what is our RTP vision? The 2045 vision is really to create a shared regional transportation document that identifies regional needs, funding, and policies that serve and benefit the entire Southeast Florida region. Now, really, this document builds upon the three respective LRTPs and really creates a unified voice. The document is really a call for action to really to diversify and, look at our current mobility approach and really connect to our land use planning. Next slide, please. Now, we really structured this document to ask big questions, and we even wanted to find bigger answers. With limited land, limited financial resources, we kind of really need to be more efficient about what we currently have. So, we have to ask questions like, how do we move a growing population? How should we spend our limited transportation dollars? These are questions that we really want to set out to answer within this document. Next slide, please. Now, just to go over some of the steps we took towards to create this plan is, and just so that the audience knows, technical memorandum was completed for all these steps. First we had to define the goals, objectives, and measures of effectiveness and best practices for the transit-supportive regions. We looked at all the plans. Of course, then we had to define the regional multimodal corridors network. We have to define what constitutes a regional trip. So we had to define what are the roadways, what are the waterways, what are the transportation hubs, what are the railways that really define our region. Then we took a look at a legislative and funding framework. Then we had a scenario planning and transit propensity exercise where we looked at future transit development, at different intensities, and really connected it to land use to see what the effects would be. Then we took a look at our financial resources, what is really available to the region, and then we used travel demand modeling to really see what are the tangible effects of the various scenarios that we're testing within a scenario planning and a transit propensity. Next slide, please. So this was really just a shout out to our board member, and I want to keep this on there. Our board member, one of our board member, our MPO board member is the representative on our TPO, and he really gave the call for action, the letter from the chair. This was his idea, so he's at the beginning of the document. Next slide, please. And then these are just some of the things that we covered, some of the table of contents. Here's some of the issues that we covered throughout the presentation, throughout the document. We have a call for action. We went over the transportation policies, the input and feedback. Next slide, please. And then, as I said, this was also one of the graphics that we used to really define the region. This is how we told how many miles of miles are on roadways, how many miles of rail, how many roadways, how many hubs. Next slide, please. So, as I said, to get into the goals and objectives, what we really did is the RTP team, they looked at all the different RTPs, the LRTPs, and they kind of synthesized what is the main theme, what are all the RTPs trying to message. So the theme of all documents are sustainability and quality of life. That is really what we wanted to push forward with this document. And we want to have goals that address, things such as, the multimodal system and land use, the health, environment, and safety, the economy, and the equity and public support. Next slide, please. Now, what are some of the major issues that we're facing as a region? First, I'd say the first major issue that we need to look at is our growing population. Within the next 20 years, we're looking at 7.5 million people in the region. That's a 30% growth. And of course, with this growth, that's going to lead to more congestion, more emphasis on our infrastructure, more pollution. So this is something that we're going to need to address. The next issue that we saw from doing the analysis is the mismatched investments. So where there is a priority for transit in a region, what we really saw is that only 14% of the investments within the region from the regional plans really go to systems management or transit type projects, complete streets. And then the next issue we have is limited access. If we really keep with the status quo on our trend right now, our development patterns really don't promote transit use. So if we really stay along trend, we're looking at by 2045, only 5% of people will have access to high capacity transit from their homes, and 10% of people have access to high capacity transit from their jobs. Next step, please. Next slide. Now, just to even go a little bit further into the scenarios. So we looked at 3 different scenarios. We looked at a high capacity transit needs. Now, what this is, we want to look at, what regional scale transit services are needed. We wanted to look at various type of transit investments for the region. And the RTAC, which is a Regional Technical Advisory Committee, which is a subcommittee of the CEFTEC, really helped to guide this process to see, what regional network, what transit systems can we have, how, the various effects of a robust transit system. And with that, the second step in that scenario is to test the growth and development. What development patterns are necessary to really get the most out of the high capacity transit needs? It's not only about what about the density, but where that density occurs. And then we wanted to look at the financial and legislative framework, like what is available, what may be needed, what changes to policy and legislation will really allow for greater flexibility in how we can use our existing revenue sources. And what this graphic shows to the right is really the trend scenario and the degrees of change from trend from the three scenarios tested. Next slide, please. Now to even dig a little further. So as I said, trend is business as usual. Emphasis on SIS highways, existing transit service. And then the next scenario we tested was a regional transit, where we went all in regional scale premium transit, high capacity transit on all the major corridors that connect the regions, commuter routes to connect the whole region. And then the next scenario is we put alternative growth scenario up on that regional transit. So we're looking at densifying these transit corridors, look at land use changes that will enable 75% of the future population and jobs to be around this high capacity transit. As I said, to really get the most bang out of your buck from the investment in a regional transit scale. Next slide, please. So now what we saw from the travel demand modeling all these three different scenarios, we can see from trend, 5% of people, as I said, would have access to high capacity transit from their homes, and 10% will have access to high capacity transit from their jobs. If we just go status quo, follow trend. Now, if we go all in a regional scale, we'll have, I'd say 20% of people have access to high capacity transit from their homes, and 35% of people will have access to high capacity transit from their jobs. Now, if we add an alternative growth scenario to that, we have 35% of people having access to high capacity transit from their homes, and up to 50% of people that will have access to high capacity transit from their jobs. And I think, this is really where the region, looking at the plans, looking at what we're prioritizing, this is really where we want to head, as a region, given the population growth that we're slated for. Next slide, please. Now, as I said, we also looked at our investment decisions as a region. We looked at all three plans to see, where exactly our funding goes. And then when we did that analysis, what you can see from this graph is that really, as I said previously, only 14% of the funds right now really goes to, complete streets, system management, transit, roadway and freight. So this really just kind of highlights the disconnect in what we want as a region, where we want to go, but then what our cost feasible plans are, are actually having funding dedicated to. Next slide, please. Now, I'd say we're almost at the bullseye, between the Tri-Rail extension to downtown Miami, between a smart plan connecting the whole region, going up to the north, our complete streets policies and guidelines. I'd say we're almost there. We're almost at the bullseye. So we're getting towards the vision. We're making great strides towards achieving our RTP vision. But next slide, please. The major part, as I said, the major part of this document was really a call to action. And as such, we wanted to define policies to really set the groundwork and set the framework to really accomplish these goals that we want as a region. So these were the four policies that were defined by the RTP. Now, first, we have a regional transit with supporting infrastructure. This highlights the need to connect the region with a high capacity transit, from Palm Beach all the way down. The next policies, we want to look at new resources. We want to look at, with the gas tax dwindling away to support our transportation system, we need to find different resources to really support our system. That's something that we've known for a long time. We also want to look into complementary land uses. If we're going to make all this investments into high capacity transit into our region, we want to make sure, as I said, we get the most bang for a buck from that, and we can have transportation oriented development to get the most, as I said, ridership, most use out of that investment. And then we want to look at flexible revenue spending. We as a county, as I said, not as a county, as a region, we can see that we want to prioritize certain projects, but we want to have that flexibility to say, hey, you know what, if we're, you know, built out and we see need for, you know, more complete street types projects, or, you know, more transit type projects, we want to have the flexibility to say, you know what, let's switch some of our funding depending on what our needs are. So these are the 4 policies that we defined in the document, and I think that is my presentation. Next slide, please. Yep. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. I know I have Mr. Fernandez, who's the chair, is also part of that CEFTEC committee. So we'll be here to tag team any questions that the council may have.
All right. Thank you, Tawari.
No problem.
Any questions for Mr. Edmondson on the presentation? Any comments? All right. Thank you so much, Tawari. Appreciate the update.
And thank you for the team for having me.
You're welcome. All right. Next item on the agenda is 4B, the Smart Demonstration Projects. And we have Lisa Colmenares from the TPO, and Zachary Parnas from WSP.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Lisa Colmenares, and I am with the TPO. And with me today, I also have Zach Parnas from WSP, and we're going to be providing to you our findings on the Smart Demonstration Monitoring Program study, which started July of last year, and we have come to an end of our study, and we wanted to give you a summary of all of the great work we have done together. All right, next slide. So just to provide an agenda today, we wanted to give everybody a little background on the Smart Demonstration Program, just for those of you who may not be familiar with our program. We're going to give you a little background on what the study purpose is for the Smart Demonstration Monitoring Program, a little very high-level literature review findings, and then we're going to go straight into our performance framework, where we will be going into detail in our performance measures and the evaluation criteria that accompany that framework. And then we're going to provide our recommended strategies moving forward and some conclusions on our study. Next slide. So back in April of 2018, our TPO governing board directed our executive director to look at a program of projects that are that could be demonstration projects that would mainly address first last mile connections to the SMART plan, and initially provide access to existing and also to propose future smart transit stations. The main idea of this program is to advance elements of the SMART plan. So when we crafted this program, the main idea was to provide for 3 types of projects, which would be new fixed routes, new on-demand responsive projects, and new transit facilities. So back in 2018, the TPO governing board adopted our first class of program of projects. And after that, we have been very successful, and we are currently in our 3rd year of smart demonstration projects. Next slide. And just to give you a little background of the Smart Demonstration Monitoring Program, our TPO saw also a need to monitor the success of these projects. Why? Because obviously the Smart Demonstration Program supports and advances the SMART plan and advances in the goals of the SMART plan. It is very important to keep in mind that the SMART plan goals are, first of all, to increase regional mobility, number 2, to reduce congestion, and number 3, to consider the transportation needs of all residents within Miami-Dade County. So within the realm of these program of projects, we wanted to see how these projects were supporting the goals of the SMART plan to not only see continued funding possibility, but also to see if these projects needed to be tailored in terms of the supply and demand. So what was the objective of the study? To develop a methodology which establishes a common criteria to monitor, evaluate, and assess the performance of all of these individual projects that are part of the SMART demonstration program. Next slide. So where are we today? One of the main things that we have for the SMART demonstration program is that we can provide funding up to 3 years. There's eligibility of funding up to 3 years. And all of these projects are supported in our list of program priorities. So that is one of the main things that is very important to highlight. So in 2018, which is the phase 1, we advanced 17 projects adopted by our board. In the phase 2 in 2019, we advanced 13 projects. And in phase 3, we advanced 7 additional projects. It's very important to note that the program of projects has a combination of federal, state, and local funds. And the majority of these projects have a 50-50 match. So that if there's a municipal project, the municipality will have a 50% local match with perhaps a 50% state funding. It's very important that up to date we have 12 projects that are up and running. There was one project in 2018 that was discontinued via agency consensus, and it was recommended to look at it forward once the Northeast Corridor was up and running. And there's 4 additional projects that are scheduled to open in the month of October. And 2 of the 12 projects that are running today just started service in the past couple of weeks, just so you know. So there's a West Miami on-demand responsive service, and also the FIU Panther Station on-demand service, providing mobility to the students and staff at FIU and also in the adjacent areas. Next slide. So one of the tasks that we provided to our team was to look at the insight of what was the state of the industry regarding the evaluation processes at the local, state, and national level to assess the success of transit projects, to those projects that are akin or similar to the SMART demonstration program. So we looked at different guidelines and manuals, national and state level, and it's very important that since we are working with state funds, we look very, very closely at those procedures and guidelines from the state for these types of projects that we have in our demonstration program. So we look very closely at the service development program. We also looked at the transit corridor program, and we also looked at the park and ride program. So these are all included in our literature review, as well as our FDOT state management plan. We also drew from best practices included at the state and national level to evaluate how they're looking at performance for fixed routes, for transit facilities, and also for on-demand responsive services. We looked at examples from other cities. The main summary from our literature review that was very extensive, and it's included in our report, is that for fixed routes, we have been looking at this for a very long time, and our agencies all report based on these national reporting criteria for performance measures and evaluation criteria. For on-demand responsives, as we know, this is an emerging and also evolving practice. We did find some examples, especially in some international conferences from TRB for paratransit, special events in small service areas, but there's no established framework. So based on the literature review, also based on our excellent study advisory group, which included members from all of the municipalities that are included, that have projects, and all of our transit operators, including Department of Transportation and Public Works and FDOT. So based on the literature review and the study advisory group input and the best practices, we were able to establish a performance framework for our study. So it's not based on only one input, but on all of these different inputs that we collected. Next slide. So this is the result of all of the input that I mentioned before: study advisory group, literature review, best practices. And our study addresses a framework that can be used to evaluate current projects in the Smart Demonstration Program and any other future projects that may come along in future phases 4, 5, 6, and so forth. Our current program of projects, which as we know and I mentioned, were the fixed routes, on-demand responsive, and transit facilities, including rapid transit stations or park and rides, were the ones that provided us the base framework of the projects that we would be evaluating with this framework in the study process. And the framework will judge how well each project achieves the selected set of performance measures, which will be going into details on the next couple of slides. And then our evaluation criteria will look at the specific project types, determine how the performance measure has improved or not, and then the reporting metrics quantifies those things. And now I'm going to turn it over to our consultant, Zach Parlas from WSP, to go into details on the evaluation criteria and reporting metrics, and I will see you guys in a few minutes. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. All right, so the specific performance measures, as Lisa mentioned, are much more qualitative and broad. So we're trying to really drill into those specific goals of the SMART plan and try to figure out what's the best way to measure them. So for example, commuter experience really looks at satisfying the needs of everyone in the county. So we're not just looking at transit riders. Focusing on transit riders is the second performance measure of rider satisfaction. And we go about this in a number of different ways. As you will see, we have multiple evaluation criteria for each performance measure. Now, of course, because this has to do with funding, we really wanted to bring in a factor of the efficiency of use of that funding, and that's the third performance measure of return on transit investment. The fourth performance measure, connecting to the smart corridors and the BERT network, is somewhat of a prerequisite, where a more intensive connection at multiple points, of course, does present more benefits, but it's really about whether we help or not. Convenience, if we're really talking about the second goal of the SMART plan of reducing congestion, a lot of that has to do with converting riders from private vehicles to transit. And so the way that we're going to do that, those are choice riders, is really by making it a more convenient choice. That also applies, those were all performance measures for the transit services. The last two performance measures are for transit facilities. So amenities is again about attracting those choice riders, whereas facility demand and use is really the meat and potatoes of whether it's used or not, regardless of who it's used by. Next slide, please. So this diagram shows you the relationship between all the different performance measures that were included as a part of this study and the many evaluation criteria that we use to try to break those apart. Now, we did not actually recommend all of these be utilized, but these are the ones that we really went in depth on in this study. So as you can see, commuter experience has the most evaluation criteria because there's a lot that goes into that. So for on-demand services, I should mention, by the way, that not all of these evaluation criteria apply for all of the different service types. So for example, on-demand services, a lot of those are provided through apps on cell phones. So it's much easier to provide a rating. And that's where we look at things like the peak period trip rating, pulling out specifically how do riders perceive their transit experience during a commute versus during an off-peak time. Now, we also look at specifically the actual ridership, the total ridership, and we also look at where those routes connect. So if it's not connecting an employment area and a residential area, then obviously it's not necessarily creating a reduction along those main commuting thoroughfares. We had some on-demand service areas such as Pinecrest, where it has an alternative use. They found that there was a lot of people using it to get to and from school, and also senior citizens. So we looked at all these different things. And then we also wanted to put out a survey, a broad survey of how people perceived their commuting experience, because perception and reality can sometimes be a little bit separated. Now, for rider satisfaction, we again went with multiple different evaluation criteria, doing a survey, looking directly at growth, and also trying to ask people specifically, was this trip a conversion from a private vehicle trip? Return on transit investment, the third performance measure, is really broken into two parts. There's the financial part, which is about cost per passenger trip, but there's also a factor of route productivity. So regardless of how much it costs, if we're able to provide a robust service that has a lot of people using it, then maybe that's worth spending a little bit more on. And that's what that second evaluation criteria of route productivity is about. Connecting to the smart corridors and the BERT network, you can't really get much more straightforward than that. And so that one only has one evaluation criteria. In convenience, we tried to break apart the different pieces of what makes a trip convenient. So it's not just how long you have to wait for the trip, but also how reliable it is, and if it gives you increased flexibility. We all know that the rise of some of these on-demand services, such as Freebie, it originated on South Beach. So obviously, that's not about commuting as much, but it presents people with an option to save money on an Uber trip or something like that by taking a Freebie. Now, when we broke apart the facilities, the amenities, we looked at a lot of different pieces from the literature review to look at what exactly is necessary for a facility that people actually use. So we broke this apart into individual design elements that could be looked at in a design review. Each one of these are really project by project, so there had to be flexibility included so that different facility types could have different amenities and still satisfy that performance measure. Whereas facility demand and use, it really breaks down into two things. For park and rides, it's a matter of how much that parking is actually utilized. And for all other types of facilities, it has to do with the total amount of boardings and alightings that take place at those facilities. Next slide, please. So these are the recommended performance measures for the first phase rollout of these evaluation criteria. We really wanted to simplify it and stay focused, making this practical for the sponsoring agencies and something that can really make an impact right out of the gate. So we broke it down to rider satisfaction, return on transit investment, and the facility demand and use. All of these evaluation criteria, of course, were discussed on the previous slide. Next slide, please. Now, when we break down the specific metrics for these evaluation criteria, you can see for rider satisfaction, we have two different survey questions. As I explained previously, these have to do with rating the individual trip and determining whether that trip was converted from a private vehicle trip or not. And then ridership growth, we really focus on the monthly ridership. A lot of service providers have the flexibility and the ability to provide more fine-tuned, fine-grained ridership information. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to the total amount of ridership that's provided. Next slide, please. For return on transit investment, it really breaks things down into cost and ridership. So it's simply how many rides can you provide for the dollar? And that is our first evaluation criteria. The second one, of course, like I said, we try to remove a little bit of that financial factor, and it's really about how much ridership can we provide per time served. Next slide, please. And facility demand and use, it's about the average daily occupancy percentage for the park and rides, and this helps us understand if it's right-sized. You know, we all know about real estate values in Miami-Dade County, and it's really important to make sure that a facility is right-sized to provide the best service possible. And for facility utilization, we wanted to look at the total ridership of the connecting routes because we're trying to zoom out and get that big picture of how we're impacting the whole transit system. Next slide, please. So Lisa, if you want to handle the recommendations that we made and get into a little more detail on that.
Okay. All right. So we have some recommendations from the study. So in line with FDOT's reporting and other reporting, we are looking at quarterly project evaluations. So that way it will also assist the agencies in rapidly adapting the supply to meeting any changing demands. And we already seen that with several of the municipalities where they have requested to increase service, for example, to evening or weekends based on the supply and the demand that they're seeing, increased demand based on the service, and even adding vehicles to adapt to that demand. The other thing is, as Zach mentioned, roll out the evaluations for these 3 performance measures that we saw before: the rider satisfaction and return on transit investment for the services, and the facility demand and use for the transit facilities. So the main things that we would like to do is have the agencies continue coordinating with us to make sure that all of the project information is included in our list of program priorities, and continue working with the applicants. It's very important that the data can be easily collected, and if you don't have that ability, we can make sure that you have it right up the bat before you start operating these smart demonstration programs. We had one municipality that is already requesting the APC devices so they can track their demand. So that's important. If you don't have that in vehicles, we could make it part of that application. For on-demand responsive services, one of the providers has already reached out to us to make sure that any changes that need to be provided, they could work with us and make sure that they have that built-in data reporting procedures, but we anticipate that those are already included with the 2 providers that we have in the county, one through the Department of Transportation and Public Works, and the other one is a private public-private partnership that has been working with several of the municipalities so far. And for the park and rides, it's important that we have those regular counts for parking utilization so we can assist the municipalities and see how those are being utilized and make any necessary changes that are needed. And then look at the applicants' goals and objectives in the applications in relation to the performance framework. Next slide. So based on all the work that we have done, we have 4 main conclusions in our study. So the SMART demonstration program, as we mentioned, consists of fixed transit routes, on-demand services, and transit facilities, and these all advance elements of the SMART plan. The framework for technical evaluation was developed based on the literature review results, feedback from our excellent study advisory group, and we thank all of them for their support and their input, and the interviews with some of our service providers that are looking at some cutting-edge mobility ways to serve the public. Funding, as I mentioned, is provided through federal, state, and local funds. And the program of projects are prioritized annually through our list of program priorities. So the next step for implementation is continue working with FDOT. They've been an awesome partner. So that way we can coordinate through the list of program priorities process and also through the applications process of FDOT to incorporate the recommendations of this study. And we will continue working and providing guidance to the implementing agencies on the best way to monitor performance and monitoring these projects so we can continue being successful in responding to the changing needs of the transportation market demands. And with that, I want to thank you all for your attention, for your support with the program and with the study, and open it up for any questions through the chair. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Lisa. And Zachary, for your presentations. Any questions or comments for them? All right. All right, thank you so much, Lisa and Zach. With that said, do I have a motion to adjourn? I see people nodding, but nobody giving me a motion.
Motion here, Danny Iglesias.
All right, thank you. All right. Second?
Second.
All right, thank you. So with that said, I think let's go ahead. I think everybody's nodding, so please let the record reflect everybody's in agreement. Thank you so much, and hopefully soon we could be meeting as we normally do, but I appreciate everybody's effort in joining us on the virtual world. So thank you. Have a good afternoon, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.